The alarm hit before I even opened my eyes. A deep red pulse of light swept across my bunk wall, and the ship's voice cut through the air like a blade. Hull breach detected. Sector 9, all personnel report to emergency stations. I rolled out of bed, and my boots hit the floor, before my brain caught up with what was happening. Station halyard had never sounded that alarm before, not once in the 8 months I had been posted here. My hands were already pulling my jacket on when the floor shook under me, a hard jolt that rattled the cups on my shelf and sent one crashing to the floor. I did not stop to pick it up. I ran. The corridor outside my quarters was already filling with people, some in uniform, some still in sleep clothes, all moving in the same direction, toward the emergency shelters near the core. Lights flickered along the ceiling panels. Somewhere behind me, metal groaned, a long, low sound like the whole station was in pain. I was halfway to the shelter doors when I heard it. A voice, small and sharp, cutting through the noise of boots and alarms. It was not calling for help in the usual way. It was calling in a language I did not know, fast and clipped, the kind of sound that told you someone was scared even if you could not understand the words. I stopped. Everyone else kept moving past me, a river of bodies heading toward safety, and I stood there like a rock in the current, listening. The sound came from a side corridor, one that led toward the research wing, the part of the station that was supposed to be sealed off during any emergency. I should have kept walking. Every training drill I had ever sat through told me to keep walking, to trust the system, to let the automated safety protocols handle whatever was happening in a restricted zone. I did not keep walking. I turned into the side corridor, and the lights there were worse, half of them dead, the other half stuttering like a dying heartbeat. The air smelled sharp, like burnt wiring. At the end of the hall, a heavy door had jammed halfway open, and through the gap, I could see a shape pressed against the wall, small and shaking. It was her, the girl who ate alone in the commissary every single day, the one the other researchers called Vesa, the one nobody ever really talked to because her people, the Doran, kept to themselves and did not explain much about their customs to outsiders. I had seen her 100 times from a distance, always at the same corner table, always with the same careful, guarded expression, like she was waiting for something bad to happen and had learned not to be surprised when it did. Now that bad thing seemed to be happening, and she was trapped. I reached the door and grabbed the edge of it, throwing my weight against the frame. It did not budge. Behind Vesa, sparks were spitting from a broken panel, and I could see now what she could not. A support beam above her had cracked, and it was not going to hold much longer. "Get out of the way from the wall," I shouted, hoping she understood English even a little. She turned toward me, her large dark eyes wide with something between fear and confusion. She said something back, fast and urgent, and pointed at her own leg. That was when I saw it, a piece of fallen metal pinning her foot against the floor. She was not standing there out of stubbornness. She could not move. I threw myself through the gap in the door, ignoring the sharp edge that tore at my sleeve, and dropped to my knees beside her. The metal beam pinning her leg was heavier than I expected, and my first pull did nothing but make her wince in pain. "I need you to trust me," I said, not sure if the words would mean anything to her, but saying them anyway, because sometimes tone carries more than language does. She nodded once, sharp and quick, and braced herself against the wall. I planted my feet, grabbed the beam with both hands, and pulled with everything I had. My shoulders screamed with the effort. The beam shifted an inch, then two, just enough for her to yank her foot free. The moment she was clear, I dropped the beam, and it slammed back down with a crash that echoed through the whole corridor. We did not have time to celebrate. Above us, the cracked support beam let out a groan that told me it was seconds from giving way entirely. I grabbed her arm and hauled her toward the door, and she moved with me despite the injury to her leg, gritting her teeth and pushing through the pain in a way that told me more about her than any conversation could have. We burst out of the side corridor just as a section of the ceiling behind us collapsed with a roar of tearing metal and a cloud of dust and sparks. The shockwave of it knocked us both forward, and we hit the floor together, coughing, ears ringing. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Vesa turned her head toward me, and even through the dust and the ringing silence between the alarms, I saw something in her expression I had never seen from her before. Not fear, not distance. Something closer to disbelief. like she could not quite understand why a stranger had run toward danger instead of away from it. "We do not have time to sit here," I said, pulling myself up and offering her my hand. She took it. The station's voice returned overhead, calmer now but still urgent. "Secondary breach contained. All personnel proceed to Shelter Bay 3. Structural integrity of Sector 9 compromised." I helped Vesa to her feet, and together we half walked, half ran down the corridor, her leaning on me whenever her injured leg buckled. We were almost at the main junction when the lights died completely. Total darkness swallowed the corridor, and for one heartbeat, the only sound was our own breathing and the distant groan of stressed metal somewhere deep in the station's bones. Then a new light appeared, small and blue, from a device strapped to Vesa's wrist. She tapped it twice, and it brightened into a narrow beam, enough to see the floor in front of us. "Your people build good tools," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to keep her calm the way I was trying to keep myself calm. She looked at me for a second, then said something in her own language, quick and clipped, before catching herself and switching, with visible effort, into broken English. "Emergency light. Standard, not special." It was the first full sentence I had ever heard her say in a language I understood, and even in the middle of a collapsing station, something about that small exchange felt important. We kept moving. The junction ahead of us should have led straight to Shelter Bay 3, but when we reached it, we found the corridor beyond blocked by a wall of twisted metal and shattered support struts, the result of the same structural failure that had nearly buried us minutes before. There was no way through. Vesa's light swept across the wreckage, searching for a gap, and found none. Behind us, the sound of the station groaning continued, deeper now, more constant, like the whole structure was slowly folding in on itself. "There has to be another way," I said, more to myself than to her, turning in a slow circle to study the walls around us. Vesa touched my arm and pointed down a narrower side passage I had not even noticed, a maintenance shaft half hidden behind a panel that had come loose in the chaos. "It leads to lower deck," she said, her English improving with every sentence, like the danger was burning away whatever hesitation had kept her quiet all those months in the commissary. "I have studied station maps, for research access." I trusted her without hesitation, which surprised me even as I did it. We pulled the loose panel free and climbed into the shaft, a tight metal tunnel barely wide enough for us to move through side by side. It smelled like oil and old dust, and the sound of the alarms grew muffled and distant as we crawled deeper into the station's hidden arteries. Somewhere in the dark of that tunnel, moving forward on hands and knees, with a stranger who had eaten alone every single day for 8 months, I realized something odd. I was not afraid anymore. Not in the way I had been minutes earlier, when the world was collapsing above us. Now the fear had turned into something sharper, something focused, a determination to get us both out alive. Vesa stopped suddenly, her light catching on something ahead, a metal grate covering the shaft's exit. She pushed against it, but it did not move. "Sealed from the other side," she said, frustration creeping into her voice for the first time. I moved past her carefully in the tight space, and examined the grate. There was a mechanical lock at its edge, old-fashioned, the kind of thing that had probably not been touched in years, because nobody expected anyone to ever need it. I dug into my jacket pocket and found the small multi-tool I always carried, more out of habit than necessity, and went to work on the lock. My fingers were not as steady as I wanted them to be, but slowly, the mechanism gave, click by click, until with one final twist, the grate swung open. We climbed through into a wider corridor on the lower deck, one that was, thankfully, still lit and still intact. "We are close," Vesa said, studying a wall panel with a small station map glowing faintly under the emergency lighting. "Shelter Bay 3, this direction." We ran. My legs burned, my lungs burned, and beside me, Vesa pushed through the pain in her leg with a kind of quiet determination that made me want to match her effort step for step. The corridor sloped downward, curving toward the heart of the lower deck, and ahead of us, I could finally see it. The wide reinforced doors of Shelter Bay 3, still open, still letting in the last stragglers from the chaos above. We were 50 feet away when the floor beneath us shuddered violently, and a section of ceiling ahead crashed down, sealing off the direct path to the shelter doors. "No," I said, my voice breaking with frustration as I stared at the pile of debris now blocking our way. Vesa did not stop moving. She grabbed my sleeve and pulled me toward a side corridor that curved around the blockage, one that would add distance but might still get us there in time. We ran along it, past broken pipes venting steam into the air, past flickering warning lights, until the corridor opened back onto the main path, just past the collapsed section, close enough now that we could see people still filing through the shelter doors ahead. "We are going to make it," I said, half to convince myself, half because I actually believed it now. We burst through the shelter doors together, just as the heavy blast shields began to lower behind us, sealing the bay off from the rest of the station. The moment the shields locked into place with a heavy metallic thud, the noise of the alarms outside vanished, replaced by the quiet hum of the shelter's own systems, and the scattered voices of everyone else who had made it inside. I collapsed against the nearest wall, my legs finally giving out now that the danger was behind us. Vesa slid down beside me, breathing hard, her injured legs stretched out in front of her, dust and dirt streaked across her face. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. We simply sat there, breathing, letting the adrenaline slowly drain out of our bodies. "You came back for me," Vesa finally said, her voice quiet, almost disbelieving. "Into danger, for someone you do not know." I turned to look at her. "I could not just leave you there," I said. "That is not something people where I am from can do. Not when we hear someone in trouble." She studied my face for a long moment, like she was trying to understand something that did not fit neatly into whatever rules she had been taught about how strangers behaved. "On my world," she said slowly, choosing her words with care, "no one runs toward danger for someone they do not know. It is not done. It is not expected." "Well," I said, managing a tired smile despite everything, "maybe that is something worth changing." The shelter's medical team arrived a few minutes later, moving through the crowd to check on anyone who had been injured. They tended to Vesa's leg first, cleaning and wrapping the wound while she winced, but did not complain once. I stayed beside her the whole time, and when the medic asked if we were together, I said yes, without thinking twice about it. Over the next few hours, the station slowly stabilized. The engineering teams sealed the breach, restored power to the damaged sectors, and eventually, word came through that the danger had passed, that a rare micrometeor strike combined with a failure in the station's outer shielding had caused the collapse, and that repairs were already underway. As the crowd in the shelter began to thin out, people heading back to their quarters or their duty stations, I found myself still sitting beside Vesa, neither of us in any hurry to move. "I have watched you eat alone in the commissary for months," I admitted. "I always wanted to ask you to join me, but I did not know how you would take it. I did not want to make you uncomfortable." Vesa was quiet for a moment. "On Doran worlds, sharing a meal is something done only with family," she said. "It means trust. It means you accept someone completely. I did not think anyone here would want that from me, or even understand what it meant if I offered it. I understand a little more of it now," I said, "after today." She almost smiled then, the first real hint of warmth I had ever seen cross her face. "Perhaps," she said, "it is time I learned your customs as well as you are learning mine." Once the station's systems were fully restored, and the halls were declared safe again, I walked with her back toward the commissary, her limp much lighter now thanks to the medical treatment. The place was busier than usual, full of people talking loudly about the crisis, relief written across every face in the room. I found a table near the center, not the quiet corner where she always used to sit alone, and gestured for her to join me. She hesitated only a moment before sitting down across from me. I ordered 2 plates of something simple, flatbread, topped with sauce and melted cheese, the kind of food that reminded me of home, even out here among the stars. When it arrived, Vesa looked at it curiously, the same way she must have looked at every strange human thing since she arrived on this station. "It is called pizza," I told her. "Where I am from, people do not usually eat this alone. It is meant to be shared, with people you trust." She looked at the plate, then at me, and something shifted in her expression, a kind of quiet decision being made behind those dark eyes. "Then I am glad," she said, picking up a piece with careful, curious fingers, "that you asked me to share it with you." Around us, the commissary buzzed with the noise of a station slowly returning to normal. of people trading stories about the emergency, of laughter returning after fear had finally loosened its grip. And at our table, for the first time since she had arrived on Station Halyard, Vesa was not eating alone. We talked for hours that evening, about her home world, about mine, about the customs that had once felt like walls between us, and now felt more like doors waiting to be opened. She told me about her family, about the quiet fields of her home continent, about the strange, nervous excitement she had felt when she was chosen for this research posting so far from everything familiar. I told her about my own home, about the ordinary things that had once seemed unremarkable to me, and now, telling them to someone from another world entirely, felt suddenly worth sharing. By the time the commissary lights dimmed for the night cycle, we were still sitting there, plates long empty, the conversation still flowing easily between us, like it had always been that way. Vesa never ate alone again after that day. Word spread quietly through the station about what had happened in Sector 9, about the two of us crawling through maintenance shafts and running through collapsing corridors together, and slowly, other researchers began joining our table too, curious about the Doran scientist who had once kept so completely to herself. But it was that first shared meal, born out of danger and trust and one simple invitation, that changed everything. Because sometimes it takes a crisis to show people what they were always capable of, and sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is not running into danger at all, but simply choosing, afterward, to sit down beside someone and share a meal with them, no matter how different their worlds might be.